Find the derivative of f of t equals the square root of 3 minus 4t divided by 2t plus 1 to the fourth. So f of t here is the quotient of two functions. We have the square root of 3 minus 4t divided by 2t plus 1 to the fourth. We're therefore going to make use of the quotient rule, but before we do that, let's rewrite that numerator as a fractional exponent, first power, second root, 1/2 power. We'll leave the denominator the way it is. So our derivative, f prime of t, will be a quotient rule. The derivative of the numerator, power rule, bring down the 1/2. Leave the inside alone, 3 minus 4t. Subtract 1 from the power, 1/2 minus, I will call it 2/2, and then multiply by the derivative of the inside to complete the chain rule. That would be a -4. Times the denominator left alone, 2t plus 1 to the fourth, minus the numerator left alone, 3 minus 4t to the 1/2, times the derivative of the denominator, which is bring down the power 4, leave its inside alone, 2t plus 1, subtract 1 from its power, and then multiply by the derivative of the inside to complete the chain rule. Now this entire thing is divided by the denominator, 2t plus 1 to the fourth, quantity squared. In my next step, I'm going to put the constants together, so I have a -4 and a 1/2. 1/2 times -4 becomes -2. I have a 3 minus 4t to the 1 minus 2, -1/2 power. I have a 2t plus 1 to the fourth power. The second term I have minus, and I have the constants of 4 and 2. 4 times 2 is 8. And I have a 3 minus 4t to the 1/2, and I have a 2t plus 1 cubed. All this is divided by 2t plus 1 to the fourth, and then to the 2. In this case, you multiply the exponents. 4 times 2 gives us an 8. So f prime of t equals, now this first term has a negative exponent, this here, and that can move to the denominator. The -2 and the 2t plus 1 to the fourth power will stay in the numerator, but I will have a 3 minus 4t to the positive 1/2 in the denominator. I have -8. I have a 2t plus 1 to 3. I'll write that one first, and then the 3 minus 4t to the positive 1/2 second. And then all of this is over 2t plus 1 to the 8th power. Now the reason I wrote the 3 minus 4t to the 1/2 second is I now have a fraction in the numerator, and I'm going to need to get a common denominator between this term and this term. Well, that second term doesn't have a denominator yet, but I can multiply it by 3 minus 4t to the 1/2 over a 3 minus 4t to the 1/2 to get the common denominator. And they can now combine together over that common denominator. So my first term's numerator, I have a -2 times a 2t plus 1 to the fourth. The second term numerator, I have a -8. I have the 2t plus 1 cubed. And I have these two multiplying each other. Now, in this case, they are like base. We add the exponents, 3 minus 4t to the 1/2 plus 1/2, which is 1. All of this is now over that common denominator of 3 minus 4t to the 1/2 power. And then the entire thing is divided by 2t plus 1 to the 8th power. Now that we've gotten a common denominator in that numerator, the next step is to take the denominator fraction, which I'll write as a fraction by putting over 1. We reciprocate and multiply with the numerator. So f prime of t equals negative 2 times 2t plus 1 to the 4th minus 8 times 2t plus 1 cubed times 3 minus 4t all over 3 minus 4t to the 1/2. I'm going to rewrite that as just square root of 3 minus 4t to the first power. So just root of 3 minus 4t. But we reciprocate that denominator and multiply it. So this is going to be times 1 over 2t plus 1 to the 8th. And we can multiply these. The entire numerator is just times a 1, so it will not change. And then the denominator, we just multiply them together. And we have the square root of 3 minus 4t multiplying a 2t plus 1 to the 8th power. The next step is going to involve factoring that numerator because we have common factors. Actually, we have a factor of a negative 2. So we can start with that. And f prime of t will be a negative 2 factored out, and that will leave us a 2t plus 1 to the 4th, and a positive 4 times 2t plus 1 cubed times a 3 minus 4t all over that denominator. Square root of 3 minus 4t and then 2t plus 1 to the 8th. Now our next step is to factor out powers of 2t plus 1. I have a power of 4 here and I have a power of 3 here. We can take out the lower power of the 2, that'll be the 3 power. So I can take out 2t plus 1 to the 3. Now if we factor that out, that's going to take out 3 of the 4 here, so I'll leave one of them behind. It will take all of them out here. So there's what we should have left inside there. So that'll give us a 2t plus 1 plus a 4 times 3 minus 4t all over this denominator, which is the square root of 3 minus 4t, and then 2t plus 1 to the 8th power. Now at this point, we've factored out a 2t plus 1 in the numerator, and we can cancel down the 3 powers up here with 3 of the powers here. We subtract the exponents. That'll leave us 5 powers left over in the denominator. And so I have a negative 2 times. Now inside the square brackets, I'm going to remove the parentheses here, and I'm going to distribute the 4 into all of this, and that will give me a 12, so plus 12, and then a minus 16t. And the denominator will stay the same. Square root of 3 minus 4t, and then 2t plus 1 to the 5th power. All right, our last step is to combine any like terms together in the square brackets in the numerator. So our derivative f prime of t will be, we have the negative 2 factored out, and we'll be left with, well, I have a 2t and a negative 16t. That'll become a negative number. So let's write the constant first. I have a plus 1 and a plus 12 that will be a 13, and then I have the 2t minus the 16t, which will be a negative 14t. And then we leave the denominator alone. So we have 3 minus 4t, and then a 2t plus 1 to the 5. We're nearly done with the derivative. One last step that I would suggest maybe doing here, since we have a negative factored out, but then we have two terms in the parentheses in the numerator that are of opposite sign, it's probably a good idea to distribute that negative back in. There's no sense in having a negative factored. That's more signs than what is needed. If I distribute it back in, I will have the 14t be a positive and the 13 be a negative. And it just looks a little nicer. We always like to write things with the fewest number of plus signs and minus signs needed. And that will reduce that number of them by distributing that negative back in. And there we go. There's no other factors in the numerator. And also, it will be in its simplified form. The denominator we're just leaving alone here. And there's our overall derivative f prime of t.